For most of our 8-year marriage, life felt like a Hallmark card. My name's Eric, 34, and I've been married to Jessica, 32, for what I thought were some of the best years of my life. We met in college, fell hard for each other, and built what looked like the perfect suburban dream. Nice house, decent jobs, and no major drama. Jessica had this warm, bubbly personality that drew people in, including my family. She got along great with everyone, including my stepbrothers, Adam and Mike, who were a little younger than me but had always been more like friends than siblings. The thing about Jessica was that she always had this charm, a way of making people feel special. I used to love that about her. It's what made me fall in love. Over the years, I'd see how Adam and Mike gravitated towards her at family gatherings, teasing her like she was their own sister. Felt harmless. I mean, who'd suspect something sinister in that? But looking back now, maybe I was too naive. It started small, as these things usually do. I noticed how Jessica would light up whenever Adam cracked one of his dumb jokes, or how she'd linger in conversations with Mike when everyone else had moved on. I chalked it up to her being friendly, maybe overly so, but nothing alarming. If anything, I was proud of how close-knit my family seemed. It wasn't until last Thanksgiving that something shifted. Jessica had been unusually insistent on helping Adam and Mike prepare dessert in the kitchen. At the time, I thought nothing of it. She loved cooking, and the guys always acted like they needed her guidance. But when I walked in to grab a drink, the three of them froze mid-laugh like they'd been caught doing something they shouldn't. I remember Jessica turning to me quickly, smiling a little too brightly, and asking if I needed help. That moment stuck with me, though I didn't know why. I brushed it off then, but now I wish I hadn't. I wish I'd looked closer at the cracks in what I thought was a perfect picture. After Thanksgiving, I started noticing things I couldn't ignore. Jessica, who used to tell me everything, suddenly became more secretive. Her phone, once casually left on the coffee table, was now glued to her side. She started taking late-night walks, claiming she needed fresh air to clear her mind. Stress from work, she'd say when I asked about her restlessness. "Why are you making such a big deal out of it?" She'd snap if I pressed further. At first, I wanted to believe her. Everyone gets stressed, right? But the little details started adding up. Like how her texts would come in at odd hours, and she'd angle her screen away from me, laughing softly at messages she wouldn't explain. Then there were the stepbrothers. Adam, 28, and Mike, 30, had always been close to me, but now they seemed different. Adam stopped by more often, always with some weak excuse about borrowing tools or needing advice. Mike, who was usually the quieter one, started calling Jessica directly about recipes or TV recommendations. I brushed it off as family closeness, until I saw the way Jessica's face lit up when she'd talk about them. One evening, I overheard part of a conversation between her and Adam while I was in the garage. Jessica was laughing in a way I hadn't heard in months, and Adam's voice was softer than usual. My gut twisted, but I told myself I was imagining things. After all, these were my stepbrothers. Jessica would never cross that line. Would she? The turning point came one Saturday afternoon. Jessica said she was going shopping with a friend, but hours later, when I checked her location on our shared app, something I'd never done before, she wasn't at the mall. She was at a small cafe across town. And she wasn't alone. From the blurry app pin, I couldn't tell who she was with, but something about it felt wrong. My mind immediately went to Adam or Mike, though I didn't know why. I decided not to confront her right away. Instead, I began keeping my eyes open, watching and waiting for the cracks to reveal what was hiding underneath. Deep down, I already knew something was wrong. A week after the cafe incident, Jessica's behavior only got more suspicious. Her excuses started feeling flimsy, and her mood swings were worse than I'd ever seen. One night, as we sat in bed, I casually asked about her shopping trip from the weekend before. Her body stiffened, but she didn't look up from her phone. "Oh, that?" she said, too casually. "Yeah, Lisa and I grabbed coffee after shopping." "Why?" "Just curious," I replied, my tone even. But inside, I was screaming. Lisa was the go-to scapegoat for Jessica's excuses. Yet when I'd asked Lisa about the outing, under the guise of wanting gift ideas, She'd seemed confused and said, "Oh, we haven't hung out in weeks." Jessica's lies were unraveling, and I needed proof. The next day, I decided to check our shared bank account. Jessica rarely used cash, so her purchases should have lined up with her story. What I found made my stomach drop. No transactions for the mall or anywhere nearby. Instead, there were charges for the cafe she'd been at and a boutique across the street. I couldn't shake the feeling that the pieces were coming together in a horrifying way. Adam had casually mentioned that he liked the coffee from that exact cafe when we chatted weeks ago. Mike had recently been talking about shopping for new clothes. I felt sick. That evening, Jessica was texting on her phone as I walked into the living room. She didn't hear me come in, and for a moment, I saw her smile, soft and secretive, at whatever was on her screen. "Who's that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Jessica jumped, clutching her phone to her chest like it was a lifeline. "Just
Lisa."
girl stuff. You wouldn't care." "Funny?" I said, letting my voice sharpen. "Lisa told me you two haven't talked in weeks." Her eyes went wide, but only for a split second. "Oh, well, she must have forgotten. It's not a big deal." But it was. I could feel it in my bones. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her reaction, her defensiveness, the lies, and worst of all, the nagging suspicion that Adam and Mike weren't just bystanders. I decided it was time to dig deeper. If Jessica was hiding something, and if my stepbrothers were involved, I needed to know the truth, no matter how ugly it was. I don't know if I was more terrified or determined, but I knew I had to get to the bottom of it. The next morning, I installed a basic tracking app on Jessica's phone while she was in the shower. I hated myself for stooping to this level, but the nagging questions in my mind wouldn't let me rest. Later that day, Jessica told me she was heading out to run errands. I watched her leave, the sound of her car fading down the street, and then checked the app. Her destination wasn't the grocery store or the pharmacy. Instead, she was heading to a private Airbnb across town. Airbnb? My heart raced. Why would she be going there? I grabbed my keys and followed, careful to keep my distance. Parking a block away, I waited until I saw her car in the driveway of a small, secluded bungalow. She was already inside. What I saw next confirmed my worst fears. 10 minutes later, Adam's car pulled up. He glanced around, then hurried into the house. My chest tightened. A million thoughts screamed through my head. Why was he here? What the hell was going on? For half an hour, I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My mind played scenarios I didn't want to believe but couldn't ignore. Then, as if to twist the knife further, Mike arrived. He parked next to Adam's car and strolled inside like he owned the place. I wanted to burst in right then, but something stopped me. Rage mixed with fear as I realized I couldn't confront them yet. I didn't have proof beyond circumstantial evidence. I needed to catch them red-handed, and I had no intention of giving them the chance to deny it. I drove away, my thoughts spiraling. That night, I couldn't look at Jessica without feeling disgusted. She chatted casually about her day, completely unaware that I knew where she'd been. But I wasn't done. The next day, I called a private investigator. I needed concrete evidence, the kind that would leave no room for excuses or lies. If Jessica, Adam, and Mike were betraying me, they weren't going to get away with it. The PI worked fast. Within days, I had photos. Jessica and Adam sneaking kisses outside the Airbnb. Mike pulling her into a hug that was far too intimate for siblings. They weren't just meeting for casual chats or innocent fun. They were betraying me in ways I hadn't thought possible. When I saw the pictures, my world shattered. My wife, my stepbrothers, together. How long had this been going on? How had I been so blind? But as the pain gave way to fury, I realized one thing. I wasn't going to let them destroy me. If they thought they could humiliate me and walk away unscathed, they had another thing coming. I spent the entire night staring at the pictures the investigator had sent me. Jessica laughing as Adam leaned in to kiss her. Mike's hand lingering on her back in a way that made my stomach churn. The images burned themselves into my mind, turning my heartbreak into a cold, calculating rage. The next morning, Jessica acted like everything was normal. She kissed me on the cheek and told me she was meeting Lisa for brunch. Lisa again. The audacity of her lie was almost laughable. Have fun, I said, forcing a smile as I watched her walk out the door. This time I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. I had all the proof I required. That evening, I texted Adam and Mike, inviting them over for a guys' night. They didn't hesitate to agree. Why would they? I'd always been the oblivious, trusting big brother. They didn't know what was waiting for them. Jessica returned home an hour before they were set to arrive. She looked cheerful, even glowing. It made me sick to my stomach. Adam and Mike are coming over tonight, I told her, my voice calm. Oh, great, she said, her tone light. I'll hang upstairs. Give you guys some time to yourselves. No, I said sharply, making her pause. I think you should stay. Her smile faltered, but she didn't argue. When the doorbell rang, my heart was pounding, but I kept my face neutral. Adam and Mike strolled in like nothing was wrong, joking and slapping me on the back. They even greeted Jessica with casual familiarity, as if the three of them didn't share a disgusting secret. I let them settle in the living room with drinks before I made my move. I need to show you guys something, I said, pulling out my phone. My voice was cold, but I didn't care anymore. Jessica shot me a sharp look. What's this about, Eric? You'll see, I replied, my eyes locked on hers. I opened the photo album and tossed my phone onto the coffee table. The images stared back at them. Jessica with Adam, Jessica with Mike, and all the damning proof I'd collected. The room fell silent. What the fuck is this? I asked, my voice trembling with rage. How long has this been going on? Adam and Mike looked at each other, panic flashing across their faces. Jessica's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Eric, it's not what it looks like, Adam started, but I cut him off. Don't even try it, I snarled. You think you can do this behind my back and then lie to my face? You're disgusting. All of you. Jessica finally found her voice, her tone high and frantic. Eric, I can explain. It was a mistake. A mistake. I laughed bitterly. With both of them? How the hell does that even happen? No one answered. They just sat there, caught and cornered, as I let the silence stretch, letting them feel the weight of their betrayal. You think I'm going to let you get away with this? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You don't know me as well as you think. I stood and walked out of the room, leaving them to squirm. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. My revenge was just beginning. I left them sitting there in stunned silence. Jessica called after me, her voice cracking, but I didn't stop. I needed space before I lost control. Upstairs, I shut the door to our bedroom, leaning against it as the weight of everything hit me. I was furious, yes, but the betrayal hurt in a way I couldn't put into words. Jessica, the woman I'd built a life with, had not only cheated on me but done so with my own family. My stepbrothers, who I had trusted, had destroyed that bond without a second thought. But I wasn't going to let the pain consume me. Not yet. I heard the murmur of voices downstairs. Adam's low, pleading tone. Jessica's frantic attempts at damage control. Mike, as usual, saying little but no doubt trying to spin some excuse. I let them talk, let them stew in their panic. They didn't realize that I was already 3 steps ahead. About 20 minutes later, I came back down, composed but icy. The 3 of them looked up at me, guilt etched across their faces. Here's how this is going to work, I said, my voice firm. You're all going to come clean to the family. Every single disgusting detail. If you don't, I will. Jessica's face turned pale. Eric, please don't do this. Let's talk about this privately. Privately? I snapped, my voice rising. You lost the right to privacy when you brought my stepbrothers into our bed. Adam raised his hands, trying to play peacemaker. Eric, we can work this out. We don't have to involve anyone else. Work this out. I laughed bitterly. You think this is something we can just talk through? You think I'm going to sit at the next family barbecue pretending this didn't happen? Mike finally spoke, his tone defensive. Look, man, we didn't mean for this to happen. It just did. Don't you dare try to make this sound accidental, I said, my voice cutting through his pathetic excuse. You made a choice. All of you did. And now you're going to face the consequences. Jessica began crying, soft at first, then louder when she realized I wasn't backing down. Please, Eric, she sobbed. I love you. This doesn't have to ruin everything. Love, I hissed, stepping closer. You don't destroy someone you love. You don't humiliate them like this. You don't tear their family apart for your own selfish desires. None of them had a response to that. Leave, I said, my voice quiet but firm. All of you. I want you gone by tomorrow morning. Jessica stared at me, her tears streaming. Where am I supposed to go? I don't care, I replied coldly. You should have thought about that before you did this. With that, I turned and walked away. They were lucky I was giving them the chance to leave quietly. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. I wasn't done with them yet. Not by a long shot. The house was eerily quiet the next morning. Jessica had packed her things and left without another word. And Adam and Mike hadn't dared show their faces again. Good. That gave me the space I needed to put my plan into motion. I wasn't just going to make them feel regret. I was going to make them feel humiliation, shame, and loss. They thought they could do this to me and walk away unscathed. They had no idea who they were dealing with. First, I met with my lawyer. Divorce papers were filed immediately, but I wasn't stopping there. I handed over the evidence of the affair, the photos, text messages, and even recorded conversations I'd managed to save. My lawyer smirked as she flipped through the file. They're not going to like this, she said. That's the point, I replied. Next, I reached out to my father and stepmother, requesting a private family meeting. No cryptic hints, no beating around the bush. I told them flat out that it was urgent and concerned Adam, Mike, and Jessica. My stepmother's voice wavered when she asked, Is everything okay? It will be, I said, once you know the truth. By the time the weekend rolled around, the family meeting was set. Everyone would be there, parents, siblings, aunts, uncles. It was perfect. Meanwhile, I started planting the seeds of doubt and gossip in our wider social circle. I leaked just enough information to mutual friends to pique their curiosity. Jessica's been distant lately, I'd say, or Adam and Mike have been acting weird around me. It wasn't long before whispers started circulating. But the piece de resistance was the email I sent to Jessica's boss. She worked in a small office where reputations were everything, and I knew how much she valued her professional image. The email included a polite but detailed summary of her actions, along with the damning photos. I made sure to frame it as a concerned spouse worried about her conduct. By the time I was done, Jessica's career would be as tarnished as her morals. As for Adam and Mike, I had something special planned. Adam's girlfriend of 3 years, Lucy, deserved to know the truth. I reached out to her directly, sharing the photos and evidence. Her voice cracked with disbelief when I explained what had been happening, but I could hear the rage building beneath the surface. They're at my house right now, she said through gritted teeth. Good, I replied. Tell them I say hi. Mike wasn't off the hook either. He'd recently been trying to secure a promotion at work, and I made sure his employer received an anonymous tip about his extracurricular activities. Nothing gets HR's attention faster than moral misconduct involving family members. By the time the family meeting rolled around, I was ready. They'd thought they could betray me in secret, but I was about to expose them to the world. Let them squirm. Let them deny it. The truth was coming for them, and there was no escape. The family meeting was held at my parents' house, a spacious but modest home that had hosted countless birthdays, holidays, and Sunday dinners. It was ironic, really, this place, a symbol of unity and warmth, was about to become a battlefield. By the time I arrived, most of the family was already gathered in the living room. My father sat in his recliner, looking tense but clueless. My stepmother fussed with the coffee tray, her nerves obvious in the way her hands trembled. Adam and Mike were there too, sitting together on the couch, laughing like nothing was wrong. Jessica was absent, thank God, but her name hung unspoken in the air. I stood in the doorway, scanning the room. My anger simmered just below the surface, but I kept it contained. This wasn't the moment for an outburst. This was the moment for precision. "Eric, what's this all about?" my stepmother asked, her voice strained. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, pulling a stack of folders from my bag. "I called this meeting because there's something you all need to know. Something I've been keeping quiet for too long."
Adam shifted uncomfortable.
Mike leaned forward, trying to appear curious. "This is about Jessica," I said, letting her name hang in the air for a moment. "And it's about Adam and Mike." The room fell silent. My father frowned, his eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened the first folder and laid out the photos on the coffee table. One by one, side by side, until the entire surface was covered with damning evidence. Gasps echoed around the room. My stepmother covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes darting between the photos and her son's. My father leaned forward, squinting at the images as if trying to make sense of them. What the hell is this?" he finally stammered. "This," I said, my voice cold, "is what your sons and my wife have been doing behind my back." Adam shot to his feet. "Eric, this is bullshit," he barked, his face red. "Sit down," I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. He froze, then slowly sank back onto the couch. Mike tried a different tactic, his tone calm but defensive. "Eric, you're blowing this out of proportion. This isn't what it looks like." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, really? So what does it look like, Mike? Explain to the family why you're hugging my wife like she's your girlfriend." No response. My father finally found his voice. "Is this true?" he demanded, looking directly at Adam and Mike. Adam stammered, "Dad, it's not what you think. Answer the damn question." My father roared, his voice shaking with anger. My stepmother started sobbing, her hands trembling as she grabbed a tissue. "How could you do this?" she whispered, her voice breaking. I let the chaos unfold for a moment, watching as Adam and Mike squirmed under the weight of their lies. Finally, I raised a hand to silence the room. "This isn't just about me," I said, my voice steady but cold. "This is about how their actions have torn this family apart. They betrayed me, they betrayed our trust, and they thought they could get away with it." I turned to my father, meeting his gaze. "I'm done pretending this family is perfect. You need to deal with them or I will." The room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. Adam and Mike sat with their heads down, unable to meet anyone's eyes. My father looked older, smaller, as if the weight of this revelation had physically crushed him. Without another word, I gathered the folders and walked out. The truth was out now, and the fallout was just beginning. Let them face the consequences of their actions. I wasn't staying to clean up their mess. The aftermath of the family showdown was as chaotic as I'd hoped. Calls and messages flooded my phone over the next few days. Angry, pleading, or outright hysterical. Adam and Mike tried calling multiple times, but I ignored every attempt. I wasn't interested in their excuses or pathetic apologies. Jessica, however, wasn't about to let things go quietly. She showed up at the house the day after the meeting, banging on the door like a woman possessed. "Eric, please," she shouted. "Just talk to me." I opened the door, leaning against the frame with my arms crossed. "What do you want, Jessica?" Her face was streaked with tears, her hair a mess. She looked nothing like the confident, bubbly woman I'd fallen for. "I made a mistake," she sobbed. "I was confused, and they what?" I interrupted. "Tricked you? Forced you? Spare me, Jessica. You knew exactly what you were doing." She reached for my arm, but I stepped back, letting her hand fall. "Eric, I love you," she said desperately. "We can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes." I laughed, bitter and hollow. "Love? You call this love? Screwing my stepbrothers while lying to my face? You don't know the first thing about love, Jessica. And there's no fixing this." Her tears turned into anger. "You're not perfect either," she snapped. "You were distant. You cared more about work than me. Don't you dare blame this on me, I said, my voice low and deadly. If you had a problem, you could have talked to me. But instead, you destroyed everything we built. For what? A fling with Adam and Mike. She looked away, guilt and shame warring on her face. Leave, Jessica, I said, stepping back and closing the door. We're done. I locked the door behind her and turned away, breathing deeply to calm the storm raging inside me. The fallout wasn't just between me and Jessica. My father and stepmother were livid with Adam and Mike, who had fled to avoid facing them. Family gatherings were canceled indefinitely. My father called me one night, his voice strained. Eric, he said, I don't know how to fix this. You can't, I replied. They did this to themselves. He sighed heavily. I'm sorry, son. I should have seen the signs. It's not your fault, I said, though part of me resented him for not holding them accountable sooner. But don't expect me to forgive them. Not now. Not ever. My stepmother called separately, begging me not to destroy the family over a mistake. I told her, in no uncertain terms, that this wasn't my fault. Adam and Mike made their choices, and now they had to live with the consequences. Word of Jessica's affair spread like wildfire. Her workplace wasn't immune to gossip, especially after her boss received my anonymous email. When she tried to play the victim, claiming I was exaggerating, her lies unraveled quickly under the weight of the evidence. I heard through mutual friends that she'd been put on leave pending an investigation into her behavior. Apparently, her boss wasn't thrilled about her being involved in a scandal that could reflect poorly on their company. While Jessica's career and reputation crumbled, I moved on to Adam and Mike. The confrontation with Lucy, Adam's girlfriend, had gone exactly as I'd planned. She dumped him on the spot, furious and humiliated. Mike's workplace was also abuzz with rumors. HR didn't fire him outright, but they'd reassigned him to a less desirable role, and his chances for a promotion were officially dead. Watching them squirm from afar wasn't enough to ease the pain they'd caused me, but it was a start. This was only the first strike. They'd torn my world apart, and I was going to make sure they felt the same. Jessica had underestimated me. She thought her tears and pleas would soften me, that I'd cave to the memories of what we once had. But I wasn't the same man she'd married. I'd changed the moment I saw those photos. Using the evidence I'd gathered, I began dismantling her life brick by brick. First, I exposed her to her closest friends. I sent a message to our shared social circle, attaching photos and explaining, in brutal detail, how she had betrayed me. Jessica loved playing the role of the perfect wife, the one everyone envied. Not anymore. The fallout was immediate. Friends she'd known for years cut ties, disgusted by her actions. The few who tried to defend her were quickly silenced when I shared the proof. She became a pariah overnight. Her family wasn't spared either. I emailed her parents the same photos and included a note. I thought you should know the kind of person Jessica has become. She didn't just betray me. She destroyed your family's image. This is who she really is. Her mother called me, crying and apologizing profusely, while her father demanded an explanation from her. She didn't have one. Jessica's career took the next hit. The HR investigation concluded swiftly, and she was terminated for inappropriate conduct that brought disrepute to the company. I didn't stop there. I made sure the whispers about her actions followed her into every job interview she attempted. She'd struggle to find work in her field again. She texted me late one night, her desperation evident in every word. Jessica, Eric, please. I've lost everything. I need you. I was stupid. I made a mistake. Let me make it right. Me. You didn't just make a mistake, Jessica. You destroyed us. Now you're just reaping what you sowed. I blocked her number after that. Adam and Mike weren't immune to the chaos. My father, furious beyond words, cut off their financial support. Both had relied heavily on his help, and without it, their lives quickly spiraled. Adam was forced to move out of his cushy apartment when Lucy dumped him and stopped covering the rent. Mike struggled to keep up with his bills after losing his promotion. Their shame was public, too. Family friends turned on them after hearing the truth. At gatherings, they were treated with disdain, if they dared show up at all. I knew from mutual acquaintances that Adam was drinking heavily and had stopped showing up to work regularly. Mike had retreated into isolation, his once smug demeanor replaced by silence. Good. Let them suffer. The final nail in the coffin came when I anonymously uploaded a summary of the affair, complete with photos, to a popular local subreddit. I kept it vague enough to avoid direct backlash but detailed enough for anyone who knew us to piece it together. The post went viral. Comments poured in, tearing Jessica, Adam, and Mike apart. Strangers condemned them, mocking their lack of morality and praising me for exposing them. The humiliation was complete. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a small sense of relief. Their betrayal had shattered my life, but I'd made sure they paid for every ounce of pain they'd caused me. Still, revenge couldn't erase what they'd done. I couldn't undo the betrayal or the heartbreak. All I could do was move forward and ensure that they were left behind in the ruins they created. But I wasn't quite done yet. There was one last card left to play. With Jessica, Adam, and Mike reeling from the fallout of their actions, I knew it was time for the final strike. Revenge isn't just about retaliation. It's about making sure they never forget what they did and ensuring they can't crawl back from the wreckage. The first step was legal. While my divorce lawyer had already filed for divorce on grounds of infidelity, I wanted more. My lawyer advised me to go after everything: the house, shared assets, and any alimony Jessica might have claimed. We submitted the evidence, photos, text messages, and even the PI's report, to the court. The judge's face betrayed his disgust as he flipped through the file. It didn't take long for him to rule in my favor. Jessica walked away with nothing. Next, I set out to sever any remaining ties between them. Jessica had taken solace in Adam and Mike after the family meeting, clinging to them as her support system. That wouldn't last long. I reached out to Adam and Mike separately, pretending I was willing to reconcile individually. I knew their egos well enough to predict how they'd react. Each believed they were smarter and more cunning than the other, so it wasn't hard to plant seeds of mistrust. To Adam, I said, "Mike's been telling everyone he only went along with Jessica because you pressured him. He's throwing you under the bus." To Mike, I said, "Adam's been bragging that Jessica preferred him. He's making you look like a joke." The fallout was glorious. Within a week, the two of them had a massive fight, one so public it reached me through family gossip. They were no longer speaking, and their fragile alliance with Jessica crumbled. She was left completely alone, with no one to turn to. The house, now legally mine, was the last reminder of the life Jessica and I had shared. I couldn't stand living there with its tainted memories, so I decided to sell it. But before I handed over the keys, I hosted one final event, a celebration of freedom party. I invited close friends and family, the ones who had stood by me. Even Lucy showed up, eager to share her own updates about Adam's pitiful downfall. We laughed, drank, and toasted to new beginnings, all while making sure to keep the stories of Jessica, Adam, and Mike alive in the conversations. Jessica tried to reach out one last time. She showed up at my lawyer's office, begging for a meeting. When I agreed, it wasn't out of compassion, it was curiosity. She looked awful. Her once perfect hair was unkempt, her clothes wrinkled. The confident woman I'd married was now a shadow of herself. "Eric," she began, her voice trembling, "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but please, I need help. I don't have anyone else." I stared at her, letting the silence stretch. Finally, I said, "You made your bed, Jessica. Now lie in it." Her face crumpled, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of pity, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. I'd given her everything, and she'd destroyed it without a second thought. As she walked out of the office, shoulders slumped, I knew she would never recover fully. With the house sold and the divorce finalized, I moved into a smaller but cozier apartment across town. I started focusing on myself, therapy, new hobbies, and reconnecting with old friends. Revenge had been satisfying, yes, but it wasn't the end. It was just a step toward reclaiming my life. The storm had passed, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. But I knew one thing for certain: Jessica, Adam, and Mike would never forget what they'd done, or the consequences they'd faced. And that was enough for me. Life started to settle into a rhythm. I threw myself into work, joined a gym, and even started dating casually. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Then, one afternoon, I received a message that pulled me right back into the chaos. It was from Lucy, Adam's ex-girlfriend. "Lucy, Eric, can we meet? There's something you need to know." Curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to meet her at a local cafe. When I arrived, Lucy looked tense but determined, clutching a folder like it held the world's darkest secrets. "What's this about?" I asked as we sat down. Lucy slid the folder across the table. "I did some digging after everything went down. I couldn't let Adam walk away without consequences. But I found more than I expected." I opened the folder, and my stomach sank. Inside were receipts, emails, and screenshots that painted an even darker picture. Jessica, Adam, and Mike hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. They'd been siphoning money from a joint family investment account my father had set up for us years ago. Quietly, systematically, they'd funneled thousands of dollars into private accounts under fake names. "What the hell is this?" I asked, my voice shaking with fury. Lucy leaned forward. "They've been stealing from you and your dad for years. I only found out because Adam accidentally left some papers in my apartment. I thought you should know." Rage bubbled inside me, hotter than anything I'd felt before. This wasn't just betrayal, it was theft, and it involved my father. "They're going to pay for this," I said through gritted teeth. I wasted no time contacting my lawyer again, this time with the new evidence. She was shocked by the scope of the theft but assured me we had a solid case. The legal proceedings began swiftly. Jessica, Adam, and Mike were served with lawsuits demanding full restitution, plus damages. My father, devastated by the betrayal, threw his full support behind me. "Do what you need to do," he said, his voice heavy. "They don't deserve a single dime of this family's money." The day we faced off in court was surreal. Jessica looked hollow, Adam was disheveled, and Mike sat silently, avoiding my gaze. The evidence was irrefutable. The paper trail Lucy had uncovered showed exactly how they'd manipulated the accounts and funneled the money. Their attempts to deny it fell flat under the weight of the proof. The judge didn't hold back. They were ordered to pay back every penny with interest and were slapped with additional penalties for fraud. For Adam and Mike, this meant financial ruin. Their remaining assets were seized, and their wages garnished. Jessica, who had no job and no savings, was left even worse off, facing bankruptcy and potential criminal charges. As I walked out of the courtroom that day, I felt a sense of vindication. They'd taken everything from me, but I'd made sure they lost far more in return. Word of the court case spread quickly, thanks to public records and a few well-placed tips to local journalists. Articles were written about the family scandal, detailing the theft and betrayal. Jessica, Adam, and Mike became pariahs not just in our family but in the community. Their reputations were irreparably damaged, and everywhere they turned, people whispered about their disgrace. I made sure they'd never escape the shadow of what they'd done. The fallout from the court case rippled through every corner of our lives. Jessica declared bankruptcy within weeks, her reputation in tatters. Adam and Mike, buried under debt and wage garnishments, moved back in with my stepmother. Much to her dismay, my father disowned them both. "They're not my sons anymore," he told me one night, his voice heavy with regret. I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for any of them. They'd built their house of lies, and now it was crumbling around them. Jessica made one last attempt to reach me through email. "Jessica, I know you hate me, but I need to apologize. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm sorry for everything." I didn't reply. Her apology came too late. For me, the nightmare was over. With the lawsuit resolved and my divorce finalized, I began focusing entirely on rebuilding my life. Therapy helped me untangle the mess of emotions, and slowly, I found peace. But for them, they'd live with the consequences forever. Sometimes, justice isn't about forgiveness. It's about making sure the people who wronged you feel the weight of their actions. They'd taken everything from me, but in the end, I had rebuilt stronger, and they were left with nothing. The chaos finally settled, leaving behind a strange calm. I realized that while their betrayal had shattered my life, it also pushed me to grow in ways I hadn't expected. I learned to trust my instincts, to value my worth, and to never settle for less than what I deserved. Jessica, Adam, and Mike had shown me the darkest sides of humanity, but they'd also shown me my own strength. Over time, I reconnected with friends and family who truly cared for me. My father and I became closer than ever, bonded by the shared heartbreak of betrayal. Lucy and I stayed in touch, sharing updates on how Adam and Mike continued to flounder. The life I rebuilt wasn't the one I'd envisioned, but it was mine, and it was better. If I could tell anyone going through betrayal one thing, it's this: don't ignore the signs. Trust your gut, and when the truth comes out, don't let it destroy you. Let it fuel you. Betrayal doesn't define you, how you rise above it does. For Jessica, Adam, and Mike, I was a lesson they'd never forget. For myself, I became someone who could finally move forward, free of their shadows. Months later, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, looking out over the city. The scars of betrayal were still there, but they no longer consumed me. Jessica, Adam, and Mike were just fragments of a painful past, lessons I'd learned and left behind. I heard through the grapevine that Jessica was still struggling to find work and that Adam and Mike had drifted apart entirely, their bond ruined by greed and shame. It didn't matter anymore. Their lives were no longer my concern. I was focused on my future. My garage was thriving. I'd started dating someone kind and genuine, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe freely. Looking back, I didn't regret seeking revenge. It had given me the closure I needed. But more importantly, I didn't regret moving on. The chapter was closed, the storm had passed, and I was finally free to live a life that was truly mine.